Today on the Matt Walsh Show, voters are now beginning to learn about Kamala's running mate Tim Walz, and it isn't pretty. Walz is a deranged radical leftist and an incompetent leader, so a perfect fit for Harris. Also, another squad member loses a primary. Police in the UK arrest a woman for posting a racially insensitive tweet, and a creepy TikTok influencer attacks me and libs of TikTok, wanting to know why we're so obsessed with fighting back against the sexualization and abuse of children. I'm happy to answer that question for him. We'll talk about all that and more today on the Matt Walsh Show. DailyWire Plus members have unlimited on-demand access to our uncensored, ad-free daily shows, real-time breaking news, and investigative journalism. Don't be left in the dark. Join us in the fight right now. DailyWire.com/subscribe. Now, there's only one cell phone company that gives you free premium access to the media that you actually care about, and it's Pure Talk. This might be the best offer Pure Talk has ever come out with. Listen to this. When you switch your cell phone service to Pure Talk on a qualifying plan, you'll get a free 1-year insider subscription to DailyWire Plus. That's right. Take advantage of unlimited talk, unlimited text, 15 gigs of data, and mobile hotspot on America's most dependable 5G network for just $35 a month. And you'll get a 1-year free subscription to DailyWire Plus. DailyWire Plus Insider Plan gets you access to our entire library of movies, series, and documentaries, including Lady Ballers, What is a Woman?, Mr. Bertram, Run, Hide, Fight, and more. Plus, you'll get all of our daily shows uncensored and ad-free. The only way you can get this special offer is by going to puretalk.com/Walsh. I've been telling you to stop overpaying for your cell phone plan for a long time. If you haven't made the switch yet, you got to do it now. Go to puretalk.com/Walsh today, switch to a qualifying plan, and get 1 year free of DailyWire Plus Insider. On the night of Wednesday, May 27th, 2020, BLM supporters held what they would call a racial justice protest in quotes, at a Target store near the 3rd Precinct Police Station in Minneapolis. And after they completely ransacked the Target, the mob began surrounding the police station itself. Everyone in the city knew what was about to happen. Either the authorities would defend the police station or they would let it burn. At 6:23 p.m., the mayor of Minneapolis, Jacob Frey, received an urgent phone call from the chief of police. He preferred to defend the police station, not let it burn. And he told Frey that because the riot was now so out of control and so large that the National Guard would have to come in to defend the police station. So 5 minutes later, the mayor's spokesman texted several other employees in the mayor's office. He wrote, quote, "Mayor just came out and said the chief wants him to call in the National Guard for help at 3rd Precinct. Mayor appears intent on doing so." Frey's policy director quickly added, "He called the governor just now." Now, that was a reference to the governor of Minneapolis, Tim Walz, who was the only one in the state with the authority to deploy the National Guard. Frey passed along the police chief's message, and before midnight, Frey made his own explicit request to Walz for the deployment of the National Guard. Now, keep in mind, Frey's about as far left as they come. He's the kind of mayor who doesn't resist a single opportunity to pander on the basis of identity politics. He would go on a few days later to performatively weep while kneeling at George Floyd's golden casket, if you remember. But in this case, letting a police station burn was too much. Even for him, it was too much. Yet Walz refused to grant Frey's request. As the mayor's spokesperson texted later in the evening, quote, "Walz was hesitating." Now, around 11 a.m. the next morning, as reported by the Star Tribune, Frey's office put their request for the National Guard in writing, citing injuries to first responders as well as, quote, "widespread looting and arson." Frey wrote that, quote, "The ongoing situation is well beyond the capability of our police and fire departments to respond." But Walz hesitated once again. His daughter, a left-wing activist, posted on social media that the National Guard has not been deployed, which emboldened the rioters further. By the time the governor finally activated the National Guard at 2:30 p.m., the police station had already been evacuated, and rioters stormed in and lit the building on fire. Now, the police precinct was the most prominent of the 164 arson attacks that took place in Minneapolis from May 27th to May 30th of 2020. As Tim Walz kept the National Guard away from the city, rioters used Molotov cocktails to indiscriminately torch small businesses, cars, police cars, government buildings. All this has been public knowledge for a while now. Walz himself has called his response to the riots an abject failure, which they were, and that's an understatement, but that doesn't explain why he let Minneapolis burn for several days. For years, Walz's defenders have argued that the situation at the police station was somehow ambiguous, or that he was somehow unaware of what was happening all over Minneapolis, even though it was being broadcast live on national television, and we all knew what was happening. But there's another explanation that actually makes sense, and it's that Walz, like so many other left-wing elites, welcomed the violence. He wanted Minneapolis and the rest of the country to burn. At a deeply personal level, he enjoyed all the death and destruction. That was certainly the view of the First Lady of Minnesota, Gwen Walz. We know that because she admitted it. In an interview, Gwen Walz says that she kept her windows open as long as possible during the riots so that she could savor the smell of the burning tires. It was a profound moment for her because no one was burning down anything that she owned, so she rather enjoyed what was happening. She has bodyguards to prevent that sort of thing for her, so only the plebes suffered. And as they suffered, Gwen Walz did everything she could and enjoyed it. She did everything but pull out a fiddle while it was happening. Watch.
I would say those first days, when there were riots, I could smell the burning tires. And that was a very real thing. And I kept the windows open for as long as I could because I felt like that was such a touchstone of what was happening.
Now, she didn't call her husband and ask him why he was allowing arson in the street outside her window. She didn't display any concern for the people who were losing their businesses and their livelihoods. Instead, she went with the single most psychotic option available, which was to revel in the suffering and destruction of other people. And apparently, the media was fine with this response. There was no national outcry after this interview. When Melania Trump wore a lighthearted jacket during the fake kids in cages controversy, it was a 5-day news cycle. Imagine if she had done something like this. Imagine if she said that she rolled down her windows so she could take in the sounds of all the migrant children crying. That's effectively what happened here. And we know Tim Walz endorsed this sentiment for a couple of reasons. It's not just that he stalled the deployment of the National Guard or that he never came out and condemned his wife's comments. Walz came out and said directly that the riots were a justifiable reaction to America's failure to fully embrace the principles of DEI. So all those businesses had it coming, basically. The people who died during the riots, they had it coming too, I guess. The tens of millions of dollars of property damage in Minnesota was all worth it, according to Tim Walz. Watch.
A society that does not put equity and inclusion at the center of it is certainly going to eventually come to the places where we're at. This is a moment of inflection. It's a moment of real change. It's a moment that those folks who are out there demanding this are not going to take a commission or a report. They're going to want fundamental change. And that is what I think that's one of the exciting things in the midst of all this. You can feel a sense of optimism coming back.
A society that does not put equity and inclusion first will come to this result. In other words, if you don't fully support DEI, the government will allow mobs to destroy your business and maybe kill you, and you'll deserve whatever happens to you. Now, yesterday, when I talked about the riots in the UK, I made the point that leaders who fail to enforce the law, say by opening the borders, shouldn't be surprised when lawlessness eventually breaks out. And, it doesn't make lawlessness good, but it does make it understandable in that context, and it makes it inevitable, most importantly. But what Tim Walz is saying is very different. He's saying that leaders should embrace lawlessness and destruction as a means of compelling people to support his party's agenda. He doesn't regret the violence. He wants more of it. Terror can be an effective motivator in the voting booth. Now, keep in mind, Tim Walz said all this while Derek Chauvin was supposedly, supposed to be receiving a fair trial in his state. The jury knew very well that unless they found some reason to convict Chauvin, the city would burn again. This is how things are done in Minneapolis. And by picking Tim Walz over a more moderate option, comparatively like Josh Shapiro, Kamala Harris has signaled very clearly that she wants the Minneapolis model of governance to go nationwide. This is a model where voters are instructed to endorse Democrats' ideology or, they'll lose everything. That includes potentially their children. Last year, Walz signed a law that encourages children to flee from their parents in order to obtain puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones and genital surgeries. The law also allows the state to use these procedures as a means to remove children from the custody of their parents. Quote, this is from the National Review. Tim Walz signed a bill in April 2023 that made his state a sanctuary for child sex changes, promoting tourism for such radical medical interventions in defiance of states that restrict them. Dubbed the Trans Refuge Bill by supporters, the law grants legal protection to children who travel to Minnesota for so-called gender-affirming care, including puberty blockers, reconstructive genital surgery, and hormone therapy, as well as the medical practitioners who provide it, the law makes seeking gender transition procedures for minors a factor in some assessments for whether a Minnesota court has jurisdiction to make an initial determination in child custody cases. This kind of law is so extreme that even California Governor Gavin Newsom vetoed a bill last year which would have required custody courts to consider whether parents are affirming their gender delusions of their children. But Tim Walz has no problem with tearing apart families on this basis. In fact, he wants these broken families to come to Minnesota. Now, in my documentary, What is a Woman?, I spoke to a Canadian father who lost custody of his child after a hospital began administering cross-sex hormones to his daughter without his consent. At the time, it seemed like, a story you would only hear in Canada. Well, Tim Walz now wants to make that the reality in all 50 states. Now, because projection is the Democrats' platform at this point, Tim Walz will still accuse conservatives of hating freedom while he works to rip children away from their parents. This is from his big announcement rally yesterday in Pennsylvania. Watch.
I see those old white guys. Some of us are old enough to remember when it was Republicans who were talking about freedom. It turns out now what they meant was the government should be free to invade your doctor's office. In Minnesota, we respect our neighbors and their personal choices that they make. Even if we wouldn't make the same choice for ourselves, there's a golden rule. Mind your own damn business.
What Walz is counting on is that no one in media will ask him an adversarial question in the next 3 months. That's really the only explanation for this. He's hoping he'll get the same treatment from the press as Kamala Harris. And, that's probably a pretty safe assumption at this point. There's nothing about Walz's tenure as governor that suggests, even remotely, that he would allow people to mind their own business about anything. During COVID, Walz established a Soviet-style stay-at-home hotline to allow people to snitch on their neighbors for violating his lockdown rules. Hundreds of people called in to report that they saw people who weren't standing 6 feet apart or who kept their mask off at a restaurant even though they weren't mid-bite. Here's one of the complaints that was emailed in. Quote, "Good morning. I don't feel people are being compliant with the stay-at-home order. At the convenience store in White Bear Lake, and in-store traffic is the same. Customers are coming and saying, I'm bored and need to get out of the house. They buy lottery tickets, a candy bar, a soda, etc. Those items are not essential. And the traffic flow is the same as it was a month ago. The stay-at-home order is not being followed. It needs to be stricter." Now, this is the kind of antisocial behavior that Tim Walz encouraged just a few years ago in Minnesota. He didn't want to send rioters to jail, but he did want to encourage people to rat on their neighbors so they face hefty fines, potentially a jail sentence for, going to the gas station, God forbid, to get some items, and doing all this on a basis that has no scientific credibility whatsoever. And now he's going to lecture conservatives about freedom because he's betting that facts don't matter anymore. His base wants to hear lies and distortions, so that's what he'll deliver. And these are not subtle lies and distortions. At the same rally, Walz invoked the J.D. Vance couch meme, which is based on a fake passage from J.D. Vance's book, Hillbilly Elegy, that was uploaded by a random Twitter user a few weeks ago. This is now an attack line that Walz used at his rally, a fabricated page from somebody on the internet that has no basis in reality, and the base loved it. Watch.
And I got to tell you, I can't wait to debate the guy. That is, if he's willing to get off the couch and show up. So.
Now, after watching that clip and the other ones that I've showed, there's not really any point in going into any further detail about Walz's policies or life story. Yes, he says he's proud of his role in passing Obamacare, which has tripled the average family's health insurance premium. Yes, the very first executive order that Tim Walz signed created something called a DEI council that would address the problem of whiteness. Yes, he was in the military, at least until he abandoned his unit before they deployed to Iraq. Yes, he wants to give illegals a ladder to climb the border wall, and then he wants to give them driver's licenses when they're here. He also supports abortion until the moment of birth, supports putting tampons in the boys' bathroom at school. Oh, and he thinks that one person's socialism is another person's neighborliness, as he put it. But it's not even necessary to go into detail about any of that because they're all exactly what you would expect from a stock far left-wing politician. More to the point, Kamala Harris didn't select Tim Walz to govern anything. She selected him because she thought he'd help to win the election. And she did that because of the belief pushed by Kamala Harris yesterday and by the media as well, that Walz is a down-to-earth, blue-collar guy because he knows how to fix a car, likes to hunt. And this is maybe the most flagrant misrepresentation of all. Like, blue-collar people are not impressed with that stuff. I mean, that's just because you can hunt and you can fix your car. No blue-collar, working-class American is seeing that and is just fainting with excitement because they relate to it so much. And we know that because it's obvious to anyone who's grown up around working-class families or anyone who's turned on a television since 2016, Donald Trump is about as non-blue-collar as it gets. He probably hasn't driven a car in 40 years, much less fixed one. He wouldn't know how to hunt a deer if his life depended on it, but blue-collar voters love him. And that's because Donald Trump projects an image of somebody who loves his country and cares about Americans. Walz, on the other hand, let his middle-class communities burn while his wife enjoyed the smell from the window of their mansion. And this is a contrast that Kamala Harris has embraced. And if there are still a critical mass of voters in this country who still want to live in America instead of burning it down, it's a decision that will cost Kamala Harris the White House in November, or at least it should. Now let's get to our 5 headlines. Well, we're in the thick of the Olympic Summer Games, and Good Ranchers is getting in on the action by offering new subscribers a free gold medal add-on for the next 4 years. You can enjoy free plain chicken breasts, Angus ground beef, applewood bacon, or wild-caught salmon in every order for the next 4 years, or until the next Summer Games. Plus, with my exclusive code Walsh, you'll get an additional $25 off on your first box. That's up to $1,200 in savings when you subscribe. And, I've been using Good Ranchers for several years now, and it is, as a family of 8, we have found it to be indispensable, and I don't think we could ever go back to, getting less quality meat from the grocery store. Good Ranchers is not only an amazing partner of this show, but they're also huge supporters of the Paralyzed Veterans of America. Every order supports American farms and American veterans. If you're a proud American, Good Ranchers is for you. Root for Team USA this summer while enjoying America's best meat that's born and raised right here on local farms and ranchers. Remember to use my code Walsh to claim $25 off your first box, free express shipping, and your free add-on for 4 years. Don't miss this summer special. Go to goodranchers.com, use code Walsh, goodranchers.com, American meat delivered. Okay, I just want to say one more thing before we move on past Walz. Just going back to that clip, we don't have to play the clip again, but that clip where Walz makes the joke about J.D. Vance, the joke, quote unquote, about J.D. Vance and his couch. And the joke is referencing the claim that J.D. Vance had sex with a couch, right? That's the claim. It is, as I mentioned, it's was allegedly something that was written in Hillbilly Elegy, but it's not in the book. It was just someone on Twitter made it up, complete fabrication, and then the left ran with it. And now you have the vice presidential nominee on the Democratic Party ticket making reference to it at a campaign rally. And I think there are some people, even on the right, who are kind of laughing this off. It's just a joke. It's funny. No, it's not a joke. This is just defamation. You just flagrantly made something up that is not based in reality whatsoever. And you're repeating it not as just isn't like, we're just having fun with the guy. Come on, it's all in good fun. No, this is obviously designed to brand J.D. Vance as a weirdo, which is also why that's what they're calling him. And it's like they're calling him weird. There's no evidence of J.D. Vance doing or saying anything weird that is pretty much entirely based around this couch thing, which didn't happen. It was just something on Twitter that somebody made up. So they start with that, and then they say, well, okay, we're going to brand J.D. Vance weird. So this is not them having fun with the guy. This is a deliberate effort to defame him and brand him as this weird pervert based on something that they have completely made up. I mean, it is true. It is it's pure evil. I mean, it's pure evil to do this to someone. blatantly, explicitly defaming them, and then repeating the lies at campaign rallies. It is just evil, and there's two points from that, and the first is just that these are evil people. These are just terrible, evil people, and also, by the way, for them it's fair game to mock J.D. Vance for sexual exploits that they made up. Like, that's fair game. But it's not fair game if we mock Kamala Harris for sexual exploits that actually happened. Okay, so it's beyond the pale to bring up that Kamala Harris slept her way to the top. She got her start in politics by sleeping with a married, well-connected politician 30 years older than her. And for us to talk about that, that's terrible. That's sexist. That's awful. If Donald Trump were ever to make any reference to it whatsoever at a campaign rally, it was just, this is what has happened in our political discourse, that he would bring this up and make this claim. So they'll say that about Kamala Harris. Meanwhile, they're just making up stories about J.D. Vance and using it to ruin his reputation and brand him as some kind of like weirdo pervert. So that's the first thing. The second thing is they can do this to anyone. And so when I hear from some Republicans that, oh, well, the J.D. Vance choice was obviously a mistake. You know, look at what's happened to him. Look at how they're dragging him through the mud. You know, they've branded him as weird, and that's kind of caught on to some extent. So it was a mistake to pick J.D. Vance. No, do you not understand? They do this to anyone. Like, whoever was chosen, they were going to brand as a weirdo, drag him through the mud. Like, if we're at the point now where they can just make up a totally bizarre story that never happened and make it up and repeat it, even though we all know it's made up. Well, you and I know that it's made up. Their dumb followers, the morons at their rallies, they don't know that. They think that it's real. So if they're going to do that, they could do that to anybody. If they decide, okay, we're going to make up a story where this person had sex with a couch. Well, okay, sub in any VP candidate and they could do that to that person. I mean, remember what they did to Mike Pence. They branded Mike Pence as some kind of weirdo. They did the exact same thing. And what was that based on? It was based on the fact that he wouldn't go on dinner dates with women who are not his wife. Okay, they use that as a basis for branding the guy as like some kind of bizarre degenerate because he would not go on dates, because he wasn't going on dates with people who are not his wife. He's a married, faithful family man, and they use that as fodder to brand the guy as strange and bizarre and weird and, you know, and mock him incessantly for it. So they do this to anybody. This is just what they do. When they set their sights on you and they say, okay, we want to destroy this person's reputation. We want to make them into a mockery, make them into just like a ridiculous person. They can do it. I mean, they can do it to anybody, and they do, and they will do it to anybody. Because these are evil, wicked, terrible people that we're dealing with. I mean, this is not differences of opinion, political differences, and hey, let's see past our political differences and get along. We're dealing with just awful, evil people who, it's like, I don't even want to share a country with these people. I don't want to share a country with you. The people that are at that rally cheering along this guy who wants to kill babies until the moment of birth, like a second before they're born. He thinks it's okay to suck a baby's brains out of his head. wants to take children away from their parents if the children will not go along with the castration, sterilization of kids. I mean, this stuff is, if you support that, you are a terrible person. This is not just, oh, we're fellow Americans, we can get along with. It's a difference of opinion. Let's find a middle ground. There's no middle ground. If you support that stuff, you're a terrible person. You're awful. I want nothing to do with you. I don't want to share a country with you. I have nothing but contempt for you. You are bad. You are a bad person. If I bumped into you in the street and you're friendly and nice and polite, it doesn't matter. You're still a bad person. Okay, that's the kind of evil we're talking about now. How else do we describe people that would cheer the murder of fully developed infants a second before birth? Like you're a soulless demon if you support that stuff. And that's Tim Walz. But the sad reality is that this is like mainstream in the Democrat Party. It's a lot more rare at this point to find a Democrat, especially an elected Democrat, who would not support these same things. Killing babies till the moment of birth, sterilizing and castrating children, taking children away from their parents if they don't go along with it. This is mainstream of the Democrat Party. This is a demonic, satanic party. I'm afraid to say, but it's just the reality. All right. Let's get to a little bit of good news. Post-Millennial reports Progressive Squad member Cori Bush has lost the Democratic Party for U.S. House in Missouri's 1st Congressional District. Bush is the second member of the squad to lose re-election following Representative Jamal Bowman's loss earlier this year. And so that's the story. Cori Bush goes down. First Jamal Bowman, now Bush. So these are both squad members. The squad's falling apart. Now, granted, these aren't the most important squad members. They still have Rashid Tlaib in there. They still have Ilhan Omar. Of course, AOC. And we know that AOC is kind of like the Justin Timberlake of the squad. Cori Bush was more of a Joey Fatone or who's the other guy? Not Lance Bass, but wasn't there another one that is like a soul patch or something? Anyway, Cori Bush and Jamal Bowman are more like that in the NSYNC boy band. But, I mean, they're losing people. And at a certain point, it's like, it's not a band anymore. I don't know what they're going to do. How can we interpret these losses? What do they portend? I'd like to think that it's a sign that radical leftists across the board, up and down the ticket, are in for a rude awakening in November. Maybe that's the case. I don't know. I'm not going to try to predict that. I will only say that Bush and Bowman both richly deserve to lose. There's no doubt about that. And even putting ideology to the side for a moment, the biggest problem with them is that, like most far-left Democrats, they couldn't even pretend to care about the one single thing that should be their focus as congressional representatives, which is the well-being of the people who voted for them. It's a radical concept, I know, but your job is to do everything you can to ensure the safety, security, and prosperity of your constituents. Not by giving them free money or handouts or anything like that, but through policies that simply make their communities better and safer and cleaner places to live. If you represent me in Congress, my question is, what are you doing specifically to make my community nicer, more family-friendly, a better place for me and my kids and my family? That's the only question that matters. And if voters looked at Cori Bush and said, ask that same question, well, the answer is she's literally done not one single thing to improve our communities. Not one thing. And of course, it's not just that Bush hasn't done anything to improve their communities. Rather, she has worked very directly in the opposite direction. She's gone out of her way to make her communities less safe, less prosperous, less enjoyable places to live. And I'd like to think that ultimately that's why she lost in the primary, but but I think that's probably not the case. We all kind of celebrated and gloated a little bit when Lori Lightfoot, the mayor of Chicago, lost. She's far left radical. She's just awful during COVID, awful during the Floyd riots. Very, very similar to Tim Walz. you know. But then they went around and they turned around and elected Brandon Johnson, who's even worse than she is in so many ways. So I think that's probably what's going to happen here. Okay, yesterday we talked about the civil unrest in the UK as people have become fed up with mass unchecked immigration. We also talked about how the Prime Minister threatened legal ramifications, not just against rioters, but against people saying mean things on the internet in relation to the riots or in relation to immigration issues generally. And it appears that he has followed through on that threat. News reports in the UK tell us that a woman has been arrested now for social media posts that express racial hatred, quote unquote. Now, she's not being accused of sending death threats or inciting violence or any kind of speech like that, where we can all agree that if someone sends a death threat, if they actually are encouraged, if they are trying to, if they're telling someone, oh, go kill that guy, that kind of thing, that's not free speech. That's the kind of speech that should be restricted, but that's not what happened here. Now, her crime is expressing opinions that are judged to be racially hateful. So here's the Mirror with the report, quote, a Tory councillor's wife has been arrested on suspicion of racial hatred after she's alleged to have said rioting thugs should set fire to all migrant hotels. Childminder Lucy Connolly, who works in Northamptonshire, allegedly called for mass deportations before concluding her social media post with, if that makes me racist, so be it. In the post shared to X, Connolly reportedly posted, quote, mass deportations now, set fire to all the effing hotels full of the for all I care. While you're at it, take the treacherous government and politicians with them. I feel physically sick knowing that these families will now what these families will now have to endure. If that makes me racist, so be it. The message shared to Connolly's X account was shared in the hours following the brutal murders of 3 young girls at a Taylor Swift-themed dance club. And now the police spokesperson said Northamptonshire Police has received reports of a hate crime regarding a post published on social media. A 41-year-old woman was arrested yesterday on suspicion of inciting racial hatred and has been released on police bail pending further inquiries. Okay, so first of all, by the way, childminder is apparently British for babysitter or like daycare worker. That's what they say for that. So the Brits, once again, insisting on having their own little cute phrases and terms rather than just speaking American, damn it, as you should. But more importantly, they're now arresting people and putting them in jail for having unapproved thoughts in the UK. And I say now, but this is not a new development. It's been going on for quite a while. We know that they don't have the First Amendment over there, and they don't really have free speech rights at all. But we are not immune from this kind of thing in this country. I know that we like to think that we are, but we've already had cases in America, people being arrested for tweets. And it's going to get worse. If Kamala Harris wins, if she ends up being president, whether she wins or not, the war on hate speech will be kicked into high gear. We can be sure of that. In fact, the category of hate speech, quote unquote, is designed to make this sort of thing possible. That's why things are categorized as hate speech in the first place. And we have already normalized that term in this country. And for the most part, at this point, there's no legal weight behind it most of the time. But it was always only a matter of time before that happens. And really, it started with the category of hate crime. Because what is a hate crime? A hate crime is you're taking something, usually you're taking something that would already be illegal anyway, whether it's like murder or assault or vandalism or something like that. But you're kind of taking this, you're slicing out this special kind of version of that crime, and you're saying that it's even more illegal and the penalties will be even higher if you do those things as a hate crime. And how do you judge a hate crime? Well, you judge a hate crime by, it requires the government to look into your heart and soul and determine what your emotional state was when you committed the crime, what you were feeling in your heart, and if you were feeling hatred, only certain kinds of hatred. If you're feeling hatred towards certain groups in certain contexts, then they can add much stiffer penalties on top of it. And so we've already set the precedent where the government can put itself in a position of reading your mind. And then on top of it, the government can treat hatred as being something that in and of itself is potentially criminal. Now, we are, as I said, if you kill someone, beat somebody up, commit an act of vandalism or something like that, that's already against the law. It should be against the law. But if you did it because you hate them, because of their racial, their racial demographics or whatever reason, why should that matter? I mean, why does that make it worse than if you had beat them up for some other reason? Well, there's no reason why it should be, but once you set that precedent, then it's not long before they start locking people in jail for hate speech as well. One other thing I wanted to mention on kind of related to this topic, and not a lot of additional commentary is needed on this, but I just thought that this was a shocking statistic that I had not heard before. So one of the guys from the Trigonometry podcast, Konstantin Kisin, I'm probably mispronouncing his name, but anyway, the guys from the Trigonometry podcast, he sent out a tweet about the situation in the UK right now. And I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I thought his analysis of the situation was pretty astute. But there was one point that he made in here, and I'm trying to find, that I thought was just, it shouldn't be shocking, but it is. And the point that he's making is that, in the UK, this demographic replacement is going on, and you have these large Muslim populations that are coming in, and crucially, there is no assimilation happening. They're just coming in and bringing their culture and turning the UK into an Arab country, essentially. So here it is. It says, we have a Muslim population which, like any large group, is made up of all sorts of people. Most of them are decent and law-abiding. But as a population, the Muslim community has not integrated. More British Muslims joined ISIS and al-Nusra than the British Army, per The Guardian and the New York Times. Google it. And that kind of tells you the whole story, doesn't it? I mean, I think that sort of summarizes it. And I did look it up. I did Google it. And sure enough, that's actually the fact. That there are more Muslims joining Muslim terrorist organizations than are joining the British Army. And it's still we're talking about relatively small numbers of people, but it's symptomatic of the larger problem, which you find overseas and you find in this country, which is whether they're coming from the Arab world or, in our case especially, they're coming from Central and South America. You've got people coming in, and the whole idea of the so-called melting pot went out the window a long time ago. There's no melting pot going on. Things are not melting together. You have foreigners coming in, and they're bringing their culture, and they're bringing their languages, and there's no attempt made to integrate, to assimilate. And for the most part, and what we find more and more, especially recently, is they're not coming in with any real attitude of gratitude for the countries that they're immigrating to. Instead, rather, coming in with a sense of entitlement. And if they get here and are not provided all of the essentials and all the comforts that they expect, then they complain about it. And it is just not a sustainable situation. We cannot keep this up. That's the reality of it. DailyWire is about to make history with its first ever theatrical film, and it's going to be a hilariously rude awakening for the woke. From the same white guys that brought you What is a Woman comes America's next great question, Am I Racist?, which is coming to theaters on September 13th. I went undercover into the heart of the DEI madness, surrounded by professional race baiters and diversity grifters. The things I witnessed were shocking and absurd, and also, I think, hilarious, as you'll see when you watch the movie. And here's what you need to know. This is very important. Pre-sale tickets go on sale August 15th. Make sure to mark that date on your calendar. I will keep reminding you, but August 15th is the date. Watch the official trailer now at www.amiracist.com and get a taste of a comedy to DEI for. Now let's get to our daily cancellation. So the TikTok influencer Jeffrey Marsh posted a video yesterday attacking me and libs of TikTok. Actually, he had a question about us, just an innocent question, I'm sure, asked in good faith and not meant to imply anything. Here it is.
Why do libs of TikTok and Matt Walsh post about children and S3X every day, all day? I get it that demonizing LGBTQ people is like a moneymaker and the tweets and the videos are monetized. I get that. But you can make money in a lot of ways. And I'm an influencer. I understand about the algorithm and chasing the algorithm. So it means that they both get up every single day, all day, and think about children and SVU all the time. If you see a pride flag in the airport and your first impulse is, I'm going to take a picture of this, I'm going to craft a tweet that's about children and SVU. I'm going to be as gracious as I possibly can. Get help. I don't generally tell people what to do, and it's not a slight. Everyone should be in therapy, but find someone to talk to. Find someone to talk to. I didn't think I was going to say this part, but I want your opinion in the comments. Is it because that's rampant in right-wing culture? Grooming is almost 100% of the time grown men targeting young teen girls. Is it because that happens all the time, that they're obsessed with it? Churches, and tell me your thoughts.
Okay, Jeff, well, thanks for the question. You said you wanted an answer, so let me see if I can provide one for you. Yeah, you guessed it. YouTube doesn't want you to hear what I'm going to say. If you're not okay with YouTube playing mommy, look in the description, find out how to hear the show completely uncensored. You, Jeff, are today canceled. That'll do it for the show today. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Have a great day. Godspeed.
Republicans are Nazis. You cannot separate yourselves from the bad white people.
Growing up, I never thought much about race. It never really seemed to matter that much, at least not to me.
Am I racist?
I would really appreciate it if you left.
I'm trying to learn. I'm on this journey.
If I'm going to sort this out, I need to go deeper undercover.
They gon' say I'm racist.
Joining us now is Matt, certified DEI expert.
Here's my certification. And what you're doing is you're stretching out of your whiteness. This is more for you and less for you. Is America inherently racist?
The word inherent is challenging
I
there.
want to rename the George Washington Monument to the George Floyd Monument.
America is racist to its bones.
So inherently.
Yes, this country is a piece of shit.
White.
Folks,
White.
trash, white supremacy, white woman, white boy.
Is there a black person around?
What
This black person right here, does he not exist?
Say I'm racist.
Hi, Robin.
Hi, what's your name?
I'm Matt.
Just had to ask who you are because you have to be careful.
Never be too careful.
They gon' say you racist.
In theaters September 13th, rated PG-13.